has blown the whistle on Clubs New South Wales for promoting problem gambling, profiting from problem gambling, and being indifferent to money laundering and facilitating crime. Now, as was said, I was the whistleblower in the Commonwealth Bank case. We're here representing whistleblowers around Australia, and I can tell you there is not one genuine whistleblower in Australia who doesn't support David McBride to the limit. Now, we perhaps have the benefit of the rare insight of having been through the same experience. And here's the extraordinary thing. We've all come from different walks of life. Like Peter Fox is another whistleblower who strongly supports David. Peter Fox was a New South Wales detective who blew the whistle on child sex abuse and basically was the trigger for the Royal Commission into child abuse. Troy was the compliance manager at Clubs New South Wales. We've all come from different walks of life, done different things, but the story is always the same. We've all seen the same movie again and again. What happens is there's some sort of wrongdoing going on in an organisation. And then when it's discovered, the hierarchy will seek to cover it up. And ultimately, if they are exposed, they push the blame down the line. And the top people are always protected. And I managed to offend the Commonwealth Bank many years ago when I compared them to a crime syndicate. And I said, you give up a few of your low-level street thugs, but the crime bosses are never touched. You paid off City Hall, you paid off the cops, which was the corporate regulator, who was absolutely useless. Now, it's the same. It was the same with Troy, the same with Peter, and it's the same with David. David discovered or observed things going on in Afghanistan that he knew were things that he couldn't explain, and he troubled him, so he investigated, and he found what and quite often it works this way, stumbled across in many ways, was that there was a cover-up going on by the generals of the war crimes that were being committed by the corporals. Now, everybody would have known about this. David was the only one who felt he had to do something about it. Now, again, common things with all whistleblowers is the retaliation. Corrupt organisations, and in this case, the corrupt organisation is the hierarchy of the Defence Department, and beyond that, the Albanese government, they respond with absolute fury to somebody who threatens to expose them. And David has had the worst retaliation that I have ever seen, because I think he poses the most serious threat to the most powerful institution in this country. Because it wasn't just the generals who covered up war crimes. They and the government, successive governments of the Liberal, Labor oligarchy, they knew what was going on and they covered it up. They had to, because the war crimes went on for so long, year after year. Now, it's impossible to believe that the generals were that incompetent, and it's impossible to believe that the word didn't filter up to the defence ministers and prime ministers at the time of both political stripes. So they thought they would contain it and cover it up. David McBride has threatened to blow the lid on that. Imagine the fallout, and then you can understand the scale of retaliation that this man has been subjected to. They want to shut David down. They desperately need to prevent the truth getting out, and they want to send a message to other whistleblowers, don't do it. It's no accident that this government has whistleblower laws that are worse than useless. In the public sector, so-called public interest disclosures, all they do is paint a target on the whistleblower's back. The complaint will go nowhere in the bureaucratic process, and then the whistleblower will find himself in receipt of a redundancy package, if he's lucky. And it's the same in the private sector. So David's case is a typical whistleblower case, but it's the most extreme case I've ever seen because the stakes are the highest. Now, we've been to this court several times now seeking justice. We didn't get it last time. Today is another chance for the legal system to step up. But if we don't win today, we're not going to stop. There's the High Court, and possibly the High Court is the only court where the judges are powerful enough to actually stand up to the government. And that ultimately is their job. So we'll go to the High Court if we have to. And beyond that, we're not going to stop. These campaigns are never over quickly. I mean, my battle with the banks went on for 9 years. David's already been going for a similar time. Julian Assange, we know how long that dragged on for. So we know it's a long fight, and we're not going to give up. We're going to be here to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And well pointed out there, these whistleblowers, as you're well aware, and I'm preaching to the choir, they go through hell. 9 years for Jeff. David's been going for several years and many millions of dollars. Troy's been through it, and Bernard Collaery earlier on's been through it. We've got Peter Fox, and there are other people even in the audience here who are going through drama with this whistleblowing. And one point we need to push out into the community is that Mark Dreyfus, our Attorney General, who developed and wrote the PID Act, that's the Public Interest Disclosure Act, 2013, it's completely useless. It has never been used as designed, and purposefully so, we feel. So Dreyfus has said he is going to fix the PID Act so it actually works for whistleblowers instead of working against them. Currently, it's working against them. So the deck is stacked against whistleblowers at the moment. So now I'd like to call on another special guest, and they're all special. Cathy Vaughan is from Consortium News. Cathy's an artist, media lecturer, filmmaker, and now full-time journalist. She's an Irish Franco-Australian singer, performer, composer, media artist, and writer living between Sydney and Europe since the 70s. And currently she works for Consortium News, which is a US-based independent news organisation. So you can log on and follow them, consortiumnews.com, and no doubt Cathy will have a very nice little film of the action this weekend. So please welcome Cathy Vaughan.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm just asking Craig to hold this so I can scroll. Now, not so long ago, I had the honour of doing quite a long interview with Senator Shoebridge, who is here today, and Eddie Lloyd, who is probably in the court already, preparing to defend David McBride. What we talked about, we went into an in-depth on what's called the Afghanistan Inquiry Implementation Oversight Panel report, which Eddie said was scathing of the Brereton report. Now, what I'd like to read today, simply, because this is on page 72, and I don't know if anybody got that far into it, if they picked up this report at all. Senator Shoebridge says this has not had nearly enough attention. So I want to read you a section of the chapter on military ethics. The just war tradition contributed to the evolution of legal thinking about when force might be legally used to intervene in a nation state to stop genocide or other crimes against humanity. The long view of history shows how consequential the relationship has been between natural law, tradition of ethics, international law, and the constraint on the tendency of war to excessive violence and inhumanity. For more than half a millennium, they have worked against the realist forces of history to create a more civilized world. That is why it is important that military forces, whether in Australia or elsewhere, do not start to move away from that tradition of ethics and use other forms, especially utilitarian ones, which justify what we today see as war crimes and breaches of the Geneva Conventions. If that happens, we will almost certainly look back and mark that move as the point where progress ended and we started to ease the restraints on war. Utilitarian ethics, in whatever formulation, utility, preferences, happiness, greatest good for the greatest number of people, focuses on maximizing good over bad consequences. It provides an equally strong justification for torture, because if the suffering caused to one person by torturing them saves the lives of many others, then it can be justified. This sort of ethics can and has provided a justification for bombing innocent civilians to terrorize the population into surrender. Duty-based ethics will prohibit the intentional killing of an innocent person. Utilitarianism can justify it. The events dealt with in the Brereton report stand as a stark reminder that we have to be enduringly vigilant in working against the darker parts of human nature that can perpetuate terrible inhuman acts under the cover of war. In that light, it was significant when it became evident there were parts of the ADF continuing to teach the utilitarian triangulation method in defiance of the ethics doctrine. The chief of the Defence Force issued the minute preventing its use. It will need that kind of continued commitment by future ADF leaders to ensure that Australia maintains an ethical foundation for its military that is consistent with our international obligations and the ethical gains that have increasingly restrained inhumanity in war for over 500 years. Unfortunately, the report doesn't, that's the end of the quote. Unfortunately, the report doesn't mention David McBride, not once. But if we look at the legal professional uniform law for Australian solicitors' conduct rules, we get a sense of the duty-bound ethics he was upholding. It speaks of a solicitor's duty being to the court and the community. Regulation 3 states a solicitor's duty to the court and administration of justice is paramount and prevails to the extent of inconsistency with any other duty. And that is the debate that we've been hearing in David McBride's trial. And so far, it is the utilitarian pre-Nuremberg argument that has prevailed. Let's hope that we get back to the sense of duty to the community, because that is a duty to keep us civilized. If war could ever be considered civilized, then let's benefit of the last 500 years where we've been trying to spare innocent civilians.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm available for weddings and bar mitzvahs as a microphone holder if you need. And there is software available to take me out of the photo or the video if you like, because I've got a terrible resting bitch face, so I apologise. Sorry, Jeff, we have a change. Right, we have a very special guest today, impromptu. Please welcome Mr. Nick Xenophon.
Not that special. It should be a source of great pride that we live in one of the greatest democracies in the world. But it should also be a source of great shame that whistleblowers in this country are not protected at all. And we need to reform that. We need to change the law, because what has happened to David McBride and so many other whistleblowers is nothing less than shameful. And those who should feel most ashamed are the major parties who are in a bipartisan consensus over whistleblowers. They don't want whistleblowers to expose the truth that embarrasses them time and time again. As David McBride has said so many times, exposing a crime should never be a crime. And let's look at the facts here with what happened with David. He went to his superiors, they ignored him. He went up the chain, they ignored him. He went to politicians, they ignored him. And finally, he felt that he had to go to the media. The Brereton report didn't vindicate him, but an independent review of the Brereton report that was sat on by the federal government, by Defence Minister Miles, for 6 months, and released on the very day that he was sentenced to prison, vindicated what he said, because he said the generals ought to have known what was going on. This man should not be in jail. He has spent 300 long days and nights in prison when he should be getting a medal from the people of Australia, not a jail sentence. So this is about the failure to protect whistleblowers in Australia is a cancer on our democracy. And that is why at the next election, we need to make sure that there is a hung parliament and that those crossbenchers negotiate as part of any deal to support any government fundamental protections, real protections for whistleblowers, and so we can deal with this issue once and for all, so that people like David McBride should never go to prison again and face the torture, the emotional torture he's facing right now. I just want to finish off by saying this. Thinking about David's case reminds me of a quote of Tony Benn, the late, great British politician, who said this: "It's the same each time with progress. First they ignore you, then they say you're mad, then dangerous, then there's a pause, and then you can't find anyone who disagrees with you." Well, right now, they ignored David when he went to his superiors. Then they said he was mad. Then they jailed him, so I guess they thought he was dangerous. Now we've got to pause with this appeal and maybe subsequent appeals. But we need to keep fighting to reform the law, to protect whistleblowers, to remove this cancer in our democracy so that Australia can be proud that we live not only in one of the most democratic nations in the world, but with the most robust democracy in the world. And you can only do that by protecting whistleblowers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick Xenophon, a man who's been fighting for justice for many, many years, and it's great to have him up here. As you know, the courtroom, Marie, 9C, SC7 is the court. Will be the hearing will start at 10:15, so we'll finish here probably before 10. So you have plenty of time to get up into the court. So don't stress. Next. Another special guest, Dr. Sue Warren, OAM. Sue's spoken and written widely on peace and disarmament issues and is president of the Medical Association for Prevention of War in Australia. Also a board member of ICAN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, and she's a GP in Canberra. So please come forward, Sue Warren.
Thank you very much, Craig. Some of that's a bit out of date, but never mind that. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, traditional owners of the land on which we live and are gathering today, and pay our deep respects to them. We're here, as we know, to honour and to stand in solidarity with a man who's been in prison for simply disclosing what we have a right to know. David McBride was sentenced last May to 5 years and 8 months in prison with a mandatory sentence of 2 years and 3 months, and he's already served 10 months in prison. And last year, as we know, the court, and as we've heard from Bernard Cleary, not simply the court, but primarily the people behind the prosecution, did not accept David's defence that what he disclosed was in the public interest. In other words, we're told that there is no public interest in us knowing what is done in our name to other people in other places in times of war. But instead we have this legal circus whereby a man is sent to prison as a criminal, not for committing crimes, but for disclosing them. This should be unthinkable in a democracy. Australian governments pride themselves on being upholders of democracy and an example to other nations. We preach democracy and we preach the rule of law to others, while our own democratic freedoms are being whittled away. As we've heard, whistleblower protections are a sham. They don't work. Journalists are increasingly intimidated into silence on the most important public matters. The Centre on Freedom of Information Laws, the Centre for Public Integrity, reports that Australia's FOI regime continues to be undermined in practice by inordinate delay, under-resourcing, and the abuse of statutory exemptions. And many of our defence policies are shrouded in secrecy. There's secrecy about what weapons we sell to whom, and when questions are asked about this, the questions are evaded or there are word games played, for example, about weapons versus weapons parts. There's secrecy about who decides where our troops will fight and what they will do and why. And of course, the pinnacle of secrecy, which is the AUKUS agreement and practically everything associated with it. And while our governments preach democracy, they cower before the new US president, who has shown utter contempt for everything that democracy stands for. When Trump announced recently his most egregious, inhumane and illegal plans to steal the land of the people of Gaza, and he announced his interest in taking whatever bits of land he wants from around the world, there was total silence from the Australian government. Our government's timidity when confronted with an external bully, and yet its own bullying of an Australian citizen here at home, is shocking for us as citizens to witness. So if Australia is going to preach democracy, we need to practice it in our foreign policy and right here at home. Rather than secrecy, we need greater transparency. We need truth tellers and people whose actions reflect moral values. We need people like David McBride, and we thank David for serving his country, our country, so diligently and at such personal cost as he is enduring right now. And if any justice is finally to be found in the case of David McBride, his appeal today will be successful and this travesty of justice will finally be ended. I want to finish by saying how important it is that we gather like this. And I want to thank Murray and Craig for organising these gatherings regularly and to thank you all for coming. Because this public show of solidarity is critically important. We need David to know that we and many other people stand with him, and we need other Australians to know that things are not right in our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And Sue is a tireless fighter for freedom and justice as well, so it's great to have Sue along. We've just had disturbing news. We're not sure, it's not confirmed that they've closed the court. So please stand by. Please stand by until we confirm what's going on. But this is exactly why we're here, folks. Exactly why we're here. We're going to move on with our speeches. And as you know, the case today is an appeal where Eddie Lloyd and the team, the legal team, will be presenting a case for David's conviction to be overruled based on the duty to which he's supposed to be acting in duty for. Is it the people, the Crown, or the ADF, or what? But I think it's to the Australian people. I don't know about you, but that's where I stand. And the second leg of that is that they're going to appeal his sentence. as being way over the top, which we know it is. So now it's as usual, bittersweet pleasure to invite Senator David Shoebridge up to speak. As you know, David's a Greens New South Wales Senator and recognised voice for social justice and public accountability. David's been a tireless advocate for David and all our other whistleblowers in Australia that we're fighting for. And our little group, the Alliance Against Political Prosecution, we've still got Dan Duggan in jail. Don't forget Dan. We've still got Richard Boyle awaiting trial in Adelaide for blowing the whistle on the tax department. And our friend and colleague David McBride is locked up in AMC. He may even be downstairs in the dock by now. So that's what the case is about today. So please welcome David Shoebridge, Senator David Shoebridge.
Well, I want to start by acknowledging this court. All of us are on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land to pay our collective respects. We're here about justice today for David McBride, but let's not forget our obligation to walk side by side with First Nations people to deliver justice right across this continent. And it always was and always will be. I have a belief that over time, you know, that the world does bend towards justice. You know, there's bumps and potholes and attorney generals on the way, but eventually the world, it bends towards justice. And the question today for this system, the courts behind us, that in my opinion delivered a brutal act of injustice against David McBride when they sentenced him to a maximum of 5 years and 8 months in jail for telling the truth about war crimes. The question is, will it be bending towards justice in this appeal by David McBride? Because I want to be clear that I firmly believe that David McBride should be free. He should absolutely be free. You know, there is something obscenely wrong when the person who blows the whistle on war crimes is the only person in jail. You know, we have the Brereton report that instanced dozens and dozens of instances of some of the most serious crimes, including murder. Nobody has been put in jail for the actual crimes. And we've seen the system try and defend the most senior decision makers, the leadership of the ADF, and ensure that they're not even really questioned about what they knew and when they knew it. And there are people inside the ADF who have been deeply offended by that. And one of them was David McBride. And he said, why aren't the senior members of the ADF who knew what was happening, well, absolutely should have known what was happening, why were they given a get out of jail free card? And you might say, well, you know, the Brereton report was delivered and it said senior leadership should not be questioned. Just hang out to dry, everyone below. And of course, people should be held to account for some of the most appalling acts that happened on the ground in Afghanistan. But why did the ADF senior leadership get a get out of jail free card delivered to them by Brereton, who's now become the senior commissioner at the National Anti-Corruption Commission? I mean, that is wrong. Well, we have since seen the report by Dr. Vivian Tom and two others, the oversight panel, and it reads like a dose of common sense. It critiques the reasoning in the Brereton report, and it says in the plainest possible terms, just like in corporate Australia, just like in NGOs, just like in the rest of society, the people in charge should be held to account. If they didn't know, they should know. And what they did know, and I can tell you now, there were multiple reports going up the chain about the war crimes in Afghanistan. How is it that nobody in a position of senior leadership in the ADF has ever been seriously challenged? Something is wrong. And the report, the independent oversight panel report delivered by Dr. Vivian Tom and others, was literally buried by the Albanese government. Buried. And the government now says it's completed all of its ADF responses to the war crimes in Afghanistan. And I can tell you now, the former CDF still has a medal for the work that he did in charge of the Afghanistan deployment, still carries a medal, never been held to account, never really been seriously questioned, because we have a system where power protects power in this country. And David tried to break a hole in that. He tried to knock a hole in this wall of protection for senior decision makers. And if you want to know why he's in jail, it's because of that. He challenged senior decision makers and he said, surely there's a higher good. Surely there's a national interest. Surely there's a public interest, which should break that wall down of impunity. And I stand with David McBride, and I'm glad you're all here standing with David McBride as well. So when you look at the trial and you realise how many barriers whistleblowers had, in this case David, to just speak the truth even in the court, multiple public interest immunity claims raised by the Crown to prevent evidence being tendered because they said it would prejudice the national security. I can tell you now what prejudices national security. A sense of impunity in the senior leadership, where they will never be held to account. Breaking international laws and destroying Australia's international reputation. Making people in countries where we deploy the ADF in fear of the ADF rather than seeing them as potential partners. That's what impacts national security. And that's why it's more important than ever that we have brave whistleblowers. And I want to commend all of those speakers today who have individually shown courage in their own space, spoken truth to power. But we're about to have a federal election. And I hope we end up with a parliament that isn't controlled by either one of the two war parties. And we have a minority parliament that's a working parliament where we have to persuade people of the merits of legislation. And I can tell you now, one of the key tasks for the next parliament is to have whistleblower laws that protect whistleblowers rather than the institutions they're challenging. To have a national whistleblower commission. To ensure that the injustice that we're seeing with David McBride and Richard Boyle and so many other whistleblowers, that it doesn't happen again. And no one goes to jail for telling the truth. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. He's our firebrand senator. Give it up for David. Thank goodness we have him on side for all these cases. We have a little update. The court should be open when David enters the court, apparently, but so that we're just waiting on further news. So it's looking a little bit brighter that we all should be getting in to see this hearing. Another legend is going to have a few words. Mr. Troy Stoltz is driven all the way down from Merriwa. And I do thank everyone who came from Melbourne. We've got people from out west, past Dubbo, have all made the effort here, even from Lamidabel with the Andrew's brought the truck in for us. So thank you all for coming. It's really appreciated. I'm sure David will be very happy to know we're out here. So Troy is an Australian whistleblower on gambling reform and an advocate for gambling reform. And he was set upon, of course, by Clubs New South Wales when he blew the whistle on money laundering and terrible conditions that pretty much get people addicted to gambling, and there's no way out for them. The gambling mob didn't really care. So Troy Stoltz is now a councillor in the Upper Hunter. Since last year he was elected, and he's stirring up some good trouble up there. So please welcome Mr. Troy Stoltz.
Thanks, Craig. Tough one to follow on after David Shoebridge. Thanks, David, for all you do. Very much appreciated. When I was down and out and looking for support, once again, who was missing in action? Liberal and Labor. They weren't interested. They were quite happy to maintain the racket that's been going on for 100 years with the poker machines. $95 billion a year through poker machines. How was I ever going to win that battle? But yeah, I'm not going to reiterate what the previous speakers have said. I'm going to tell a little story. We've been regularly catching up for lunch, David, myself, Jeff Morris, Peter Fox, and it's been really good discussing our journeys with the same issues, but obviously in different fields. So it's not a coincidence that we've got this many whistleblowers who have been affected who have been in court, who have nearly been in jail, and now the ultimate step, putting a whistleblower in jail. And there's more to come. This isn't going to stop until, as David said, Nick Xenophon, till the legislation's changed, and there isn't an appetite for that. We can be very angry this morning with the Albanese Labor government, but it's also been the Liberal National Party voting with Labor to make sure David doesn't get out. So thank the Greens and the Independents for some common sense, where we need more adults in Parliament, not these clowns we've got. So as the others have said, yeah, it is a really important time now with the election coming up that we look at not just giving the power because mum and dad and grandfather voted for the ALP or Liberal. We need to change that. And this is making a difference. They don't like it. They don't like the media. And the more we get out and support David, the better. So, yeah, we catch up for our lunches and can't wait till David's finally gets out and we go to the Anglers Rest at Brooklyn. Beautiful pub for fish and chips on the water and share our stories. So, yeah, we're looking forward to that. I visited David recently. Unfortunately, I live miles away now in the Upper Hunter on the way to Dubbo, but it's important that we all maintain that connection with David, Jeff, myself, Ken Quinlan up in Queensland, who's in court today with Shell Oil, who he's blown the whistle on. He's getting a tough time up there. And, yeah, we make it very clear today to Albanese or Peter Dutton, we'll keep coming. I don't care how bad my cancer is. I'll jump in the car and come down every day of the week to stand with David McBride because he's done the right thing. He's our mate and he shouldn't be in there. So if he doesn't get out today or doesn't get a favourable outcome, he's ready for the High Court. And I think his words were last time, I don't give a stuff, I'm not going away. So he's very, he's very committed to the long haul. So thank you, everyone, for coming and let's keep this rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy Stokes. We have good news. The court is now open after that little scare. So Jeff Morris has just called and they're up there and so we're good to go. As you know, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have to be here. It's very sad that we have to come out here to protest. There's a lot of things working against David and in essence against us. So thank you again for coming. We do appreciate the support. Now we have a final speaker today, a very special guest, like all of them, extra special. John Shipton is the father of Julian Assange. I met John about 3 years ago. I went to a Dendy showing of Ithaca, the movie about Julian Assange, which a friend dragged me along to. I watched the movie. We had a little Q&A with Gabriel, it's Julian's brother, and John. And I just thought, these guys are crazy. This guy he's done nothing wrong. He should be in jail. Just get him out. Simple. So I approached John after the talk and I said, this is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And he looked me in the eye and it drilled right to the back of my head and said, this is a political prosecution. And let that sit there. This is a political prosecution. And then suddenly all the pennies dropped. And that's when I decided I can't let someone fester away in jail without putting my 2 cents in. So I got involved and we found a little group here. So thank you, John Shipton, for introducing me into this crazy world. And we'll have some few words of wisdom from John. Please make him welcome.
What it is to be Australian. So David McBride was attempting to rewrite the rules of engagement. David was attempting to rewrite the rules of engagement. That is, when a soldier can respond with lethal fire. The Americans wouldn't release to David their rules of engagement. In order to marry the Australian rules of engagement with the American rules of engagement and have an understanding. He asked and they refused. So he did what anybody would do when they want to know something that nobody else will tell them. He looked it up on WikiLeaks. More seriously, the United States and its empire has suffered a strategic defeat in Ukraine. Its weapon systems have found to be inferior. Its strategies not up to the task. Its organisational capacities have withered, decayed, and that circumstance in Ukraine means that the world, the geopolitical world, is rewriting itself this minute in a millennial matter, in 500-year matter. We will have not seen such change as the West retreats into itself to reorganise itself, and BRICS organises itself as a geopolitical and economic phenomenon upon the world. The Australian Defence Forces will now go through a period of re-evaluation, an examination of their purchase of weapon systems, which are given to us at an inflated prices, whereby we pay the Dane girl the tribute for protection. We pay the United States for protection. That will begin to be reorganised. We are an essential part of the flow of information that constitutes the American empire. And that again will change as the American empire now attempts to renew itself by returning into itself and reindustrialising. Thomas Merton, a philosopher of great standing, observed that it's not possible for the same organisation, the same society, to reindustrialise twice. To industrialise twice. Keep that in mind. This is important, for it applies to us as well as we begin our reindustrialisation in order to produce the arms to protect ourselves. In the circumstances that I've described, what sort of character do we call upon? A man of courage, men and women of duty, men and women of courage and duty who will carry forth the reorganisation of the Australian Defence Forces as it realises the depth and flow of the corruption of its being that it experienced in Afghanistan under the American auspices. We left behind another wrecked country. We see in the last weeks the revelation of the wreckage of Ukraine. We're faced with the wreckage of Libya, the wreckage of Syria, the wreckage of Sudan, the wreckage of Somalia, the wreckage of Yemen, the wreckage of Afghanistan, which sits upon the quality of the ADF and the quality of the politicians that move into government in the duopoly. This must be repaired. And those that repair it have the character, the intelligence, the drive, the sense of duty and courage of that man that's in the court this morning. So it's pursuant upon us to carry upon our shoulders those men and women who have those capacities. And in this particular case, David McBride. So I welcome you to the defence of David McBride. And what can we say? What can I add as a finale? That it is with your devotion, your adoration, your courage and drive, that those men and women like David McBride will bring to us the benefits of their sense of duty, their courage and their devotion to Australian society, nation and people. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Gary's going to sing a song in a moment. Just to clarify, SC7, the court is open. You have to go through security if you haven't been here before to get up there, and I think you'll find the directions to SC7. There is a lift if you need. So again, thank you all for coming. I know it's a thankless task in many ways, but thank goodness for people like you that come out to defend democracy and defend justice. And we just all wish to put our energy towards the 3 judges today to hopefully that they make the right decision. And if not, we'll be back here again at some point. So thank you all for coming, and I'll leave it with Gair and the microphone holder to sing you a tune about David.
I do feel very honoured this morning because it was Eddie, Dave's lawyer. We're good mates now, and she asked if I'd stand here and sing a song that I penned about David's journey, and it's literally called David McBride Blew the Whistle. And I don't know how it's going to come across with only one mic, but it's probably better off just hold it in the middle and I'll just bash it out.